So really what I am hoping that we can accomplish today is helping you learn how to set up some regular dashboards to understand your brand positioning in the market, who your competitors are in specific segments, what is contributing to their growth, what package sizes or price points are they seeing growth in, and we can answer a couple of more questions, but these are kind of high level where we're going to start to go today. The bulk of this training will wrap around one section within the Insights tool, and that's our brand compare section. So I'll show you where to navigate through this in app so that you can do a competitive analysis of how are these brands performing over time in terms of sales dollars, how to deep dive into a specific brand as well. A quick reminder, Headset Insights is a cannabis market projection. We are projecting the cannabis market and reporting pre-consumer paid tax after discount top line retail sales dollars and units. In our Insights Premium section, everything will be projected real time as of yesterday. In the category level section, everything will be published on the 1st of every month, but for the sake of this whole training, everything is going to be published as of yesterday because we're not going to be doing a brand level comparison up in those category level dashboards. Quick reminder on taxonomy. This is our trick to being able to get a more detailed competitive analysis. So when I say category, there are multiple different segments within the Headset platform underneath a category. So we have 10 total categories across the US and Canada and well over 80 segments. I think there's about 85 of them now. When I first started, it was 81. An example of this is a category is pre-roll. And within pre-roll, I'd say the most popular segment that folks are talking about is going to be connoisseur and infused. But obviously we're not leaving out our hybrid indica, sativa, or mixed strained pre-rolls there. So we will break all of that down. And when you're going through an app, you'll see these words, category and segment, to be able to set some of your filters to be able to get to a more granular filtered selection. In addition to that category and segment taxonomy, we do have an entire section. I think Lauren and Sophia, you and I have looked at this fairly recently. I know I talked to somebody else about it yesterday. It wasn't a part of our pricing conversation, but we can also look at metadata. Metadata stands for the many-to-many attributes that can layer on top of those categories and segments. So when people started asking us how many joints are in a pack or what strains are trending in the pre-roll space, as opposed to restructuring our entire taxonomy, we just added these traits into a whole new section within Insights. And depending on what type of competitive analysis you're doing, you might want to go in and see your competitive set within a specific metadata attribute. So in pre-rolls, that would potentially be, who's really dominating the 5-pack space in 2.5 gram pre-rolls, for example. You can get a completely different subset of competitors when you're looking at from that different angle. It's also a really great place if you know you're doing really well in a section, in a specific niche. It's also a great place to go and pull some great vanity and sales metrics to be able to put onto sales pitch decks. That's my favorite place to go for that. Where you'll see Evan's face, we talked about that earlier today, will be on the pages that you can access a lot of these free resources. So our website is headset.io. We will publish blog posts, industry reports, webinars. We publish a regular podcast with one of our investors, Emily Paxia, and our CEO, Cy Scott. You can subscribe to those and listen to them in the background while you're doing analysis. I have one customer who likes to listen to them when she's dropping off her kids at school in the mornings. And it's just a good way to keep your finger on the pulse. And also with the podcast, we're bringing in some of these top competitors and interviewing them, talking to them about what are they doing in the industry. So it's another good way to be able to keep track of your competition or maybe some of your friends. I know Los has a lot of friends in the industry, so he can go listen to Graham talk about Glass House on that podcast if he wants to. I'm going to jump us in app now, and I do like to start everything a little bit high level. I wasn't sure who would actually attend today's session, so I had pulled everything up for Michigan. Sophia and Lauren, I know that that's a little bit less relevant for you, so if we want, I can start to toggle some of these dashboards over to California to do a more specific training for you, and we'll learn how to load filters together. Initially, I was focusing in on this 13% of the Michigan market. I'm going to add California in here instead of subtracting Michigan. This dashboard is going to be your home dashboard in the category level section. So every time you log into Insights, this dashboard will be there at the top for you, and it will open up every time you log in. As I mentioned, I was initially looking through Michigan's edibles. So edibles represent a smaller portion of the California market that they do in Michigan. The other really hot topic, and I know Sophia and Lauren may be a little bit more relevant for you, is really diving into this 15% of the California market in the pre-roll space. So in Michigan and a lot of our other markets, pre-rolls are still a fairly small portion of the sales dollar pie. I'd say in every market, they're a pretty large portion of the unit volume pie, right? We still have a lot of single serving, single gram pre-rolls that are going out in every market, and they're just a little bit less expensive. But in California specifically, we have a lot of those infused multi-packs that are really starting to dominate the space, and that whole space is trending counter to the slow market decline. Diving us in one layer deeper, and if you're following along, I've preloaded all of these tabs, but I'll show you where to go. So we just left the market size comparison, which is going to be your home screen every time you log in. That'll open up for you. And now I've moved into our overview section in the market overview. Again, I've preloaded all of this with Michigan. There's some trends in here that'll look like California, and in my opinion, circa 2019, a little bit more similar. The main thing that I like to point out to folks on this particular dashboard is this top 200 brands. So this entire dashboard is going to be filtered based on your subscribed categories. So I am in Headset's internal account, so I do have access to all 9 categories within the Michigan market. You have a limited category subscription. Let's say you're only looking at pre-rolls and flower. When you go down into this top 200 brands, as opposed to what I'm looking at today, which are the top 200 brands in Michigan, you would be looking at the top 200 brands, let's say in California, flower and pre-rolls. So just be mindful that this will change depending on your actual subscription. Michigan does have a lot of vertical integration. So we'll see house brand, which does exist in almost every one of our markets. I think it's fairly small or starting to grow in Washington state, but house brand is like the Kirkland signature of the Headset data. This isn't a strange brand you've never heard of. This is retailers white labeling products within their own stores and selling them out to consumers. This is to help us protect our retailer privacy. But we can see here in Michigan, this is a huge brand for the market. Most sales, #1 brand, hasn't changed year over year or month over month. Redbud Roots is trying to break in there, but almost like in California, trying to compete with Jeter in that pre-roll space, you're going to see a really hard push to be able to get from 5 million to 21 million in sales. I'm going to toggle this over just based on who's on our call to our California market here. I preloaded everything because my Wi-Fi is running a little slow today. And when we switch this over to California, we can see here that house brand is not as big of a brand. So stores white labeling their products or vertically integrated companies selling within their own stores are actually just #5 in California, and they're actually seeing a slight decline. Jeter is really driving a ton of growth. We've seen them drive up 4 rankings in the total market over the last year. And then they're really pushing against Steezy, who's been the California leader for quite some time. So this dashboard, you can email to yourself and keep an eye on these top competitors as they transition month over month. This data is only looking at the most recent closed month. So this is looking at June. So when I tell people to schedule this as an email just to keep the tabs on these top 200 competitors, I usually recommend folks will schedule this as monthly. So I went to the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and clicked on scheduled email. These will auto default to schedule daily. Most people don't want monthly updated emails sent to them every single day for 30 days. You'll have the same data, and then on the 1st of the next month, it'll change. So do change that over to monthly. You can type in your email address here. You'll notice that this table underneath is a little bit squished together. It's a little hard to read. When we're scheduling this as an email, so Sophia and Lauren, if you're setting up emails for Lowe's, What I would do is I would go into the advanced options and I would click on expand tables to show all rows. This is also a great place for you to be, to put in a custom note. So that could be like, hey, Los, we're sending you this so that you can keep an eye on top line trends and see the top 200 brands ranking change over time. You just click save and that will schedule that lovely email for you. So this is one of those first places that I go in and think of when I'm thinking competitive analysis. It's really who are those top 200 competing across multiple categories. We can also take that one layer deeper. So I'm going to dive us into our categories section within Insights. So we do have a category section. So think pre-rolls, edibles, flower. And then we also have a segment section. So depending on how narrow you want to get into your top brands within that space, you can go into either of these dashboards to be able to get a list of the top 30 brands competing in that space. Again, I've already preloaded this for Michigan for edibles. I'll flip this over, Lauren and Sophia, for you. There's a lot of great information on this dashboard. It's one of our most consumed dashboards to deep dive into a single category. But what I like to pull out from here for the sake of this is really looking at who are those top 30 brands. What we find in cannabis, and this is a little bit different depending on the category that you're looking at, and we'll switch over to say, let's say pre-rolls in California to get a feel for the different picture here. What we see is that the Pareto principle generally holds true, especially for some of our more shelf-stable products. So vapor pens, all of our non-inhalable products. So what we'll see is cumulatively, if we add brands number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, if we add all their market share together, by the time we get to the end of that list of 30 brands, those top 30 brands, they generally own about 80% of total market share. So we can see here that in Michigan in particular, these top 30 brands are actually driving closer to 90% than 80% of total market sales. Michigan is a newer market, so there aren't quite as many competitors playing around in the space. We do see a couple of brands from California, Washington, Colorado, really playing around in here. So Sophia and Lauren, you'll probably be familiar with Kiva and Wild. Juana's in this market as well. Cushy Punch has even started to come into this space. So hopefully they don't have the same snafus they had in California back in the day. Give our filters a second here. I'm just changing our market filter over to California, keeping my date range the same. And as I mentioned, I'm going to jump into the pre-roll space here. All right, friends, so not surprising to see Jeter really owning the bulk of market share in the California market. They do own 21.7% of total sales dollars and 12.4% of total unit volume sales. We are in a category, again, that's a little bit less shelf stable than something like an edible, right? So a retailer can buy a ton of edibles. With flower and pre-rolls, they do have to be more conservative in how much inventory they're keeping on hand to make sure that those products are fresh. And we also have a lot more competitors within this space. So this list will only show us the top 30 brands. Sophia and Lauren, when we pulled pricing for flower yesterday, you know, we could see that there were 150 brands playing in that $12 to $16 cost to the retailer price point. So there are a lot more options for consumers out there. When we start to add this market share together in this space, we see that these top 30 pre-roll brands in California own about 70% of market share. So there's a much longer tail of competition. What I like to do with this dashboard, especially if you're just entering into the space, is pull out these top 30 brands and download them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hover over tile actions on this top 30 brands list, and I'm going to download the data. I don't need to go into advanced options here because this is just a list of 30 brands. And the reason I'm doing this is because it gives me a much easier way to copy and paste into our brand compare, sales compare dashboard. So this is what I was telling you is going to be the meat and potatoes of today's exercise, is really just honing in on how do we use this brand compare section. I did preload this for Michigan edibles. I'm going to switch it over really quickly after walking through a few interesting things that I found as I was perusing this. But what I did was I took that export and I copied and pasted the brands from the brand column into this brands filter. And the reason I did this is because I really just want to hone in on who are these top 30, what are they doing, what package sizes are they offering, to be able to better understand the total competitive space in Michigan. You can also come in here and select your own brand. So if there was a brand that we didn't see that we wanted to include, we could go in and manually add that. Obviously, it would take quite a bit of time to add these one by one for all 30. I am just diving into now to the gummies segment within the Michigan market. That is one of the dominant segments. Let's go back up here and show you for some context. I switched it over already. It's about 90% of the Michigan edible space. And when we're looking at these top brands, there are a couple of things that I want to take a peek at. And so when I'm looking at the sales growth over here on the left-hand side, I like to build this into quadrants. So I kind of think of this, it's a little bit hard to read. Let me zoom in here. If you use Control+ on your keyboard, you can actually come in and get a little bit better of a picture on the visualization so that we're not squinting with 30 brands. It can be pretty busy. But here is our $0 or 0% growth line. So there are some folks that are experiencing negative growth. So WANA is really hovering over that negative growth line. We can see them pretty clearly here on this table. But some of the folks that I would want to keep an eye out for if I was, say, the WANAs in the industry or even a Wild, would be these folks who are owning this upper quadrant of high velocity growth. So we have sales moving over, sales increasing as we go to the right on our x-axis and growth increasing as we go up on the Y. In this upper quadrant, these are smaller brands who are experiencing very high growth. So we can see here that Nobo is experiencing almost 20,000% growth, quite the increase. Likely weren't in the market the prior year, as well as Banded Edible Co. And so this is a great way for you to start to assess and address who might I need to be competing with. If you're entering into this space, these are really the brands that you want to mimic and become, these high velocity, high growth brands. There are certainly some smaller ones down here as well. Let's switch this over to something that's going to be more relevant to everybody on the call. So Lauren and Sophia, I'm looking at you, and I know y'all likely can't see what I'm doing here. So let's stop my share and reshare. This is the table that I exported from that category page. So I can go in here and pull out these brands. I'm just going to Control copy, minimize my multiple Excel documents that I have open, and I'm going to make some updates to my filters. I'm going to leave this in the last 6 complete months. This is just so we have some trending data over time. It says that my screen sharing is paused. What do you guys see on my screen?
We're seeing that same Excel sheet.
Okay.
Actually, it hasn't switched over.
Let's see what I'm doing here. Thank you.
No worries. It happens to the best of us. Awesome. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I was like, I have a feeling this isn't working right. So I'm going to start to make some changes to my filters. And Sophia and Lauren, if you want to follow along, this is where you can start to build your brand watch list for yourselves. So I know that Los has some brands that he knows very closely, and some brands that he knows are doing things that he likes. I'm thinking about like Glass House Farms, for example. You can come in here and switch this over. We can select on multiple categories. For the sake of this, I'm just going to hone into pre-rolls and flower. And the reason that I'm clicking on both categories is because, actually, let's just stick in pre-rolls. I'm not going to do that today. To clear your filter, if you have all of these brands selected, I'm like, these are not the brands I want. There's a tiny little X next to our scroll bar. This will clear the field without you having to go in and individually take those brands off. We can come in here and Control paste. And now I have all of those top 30 brands for California pre-rolls within that we just pulled from that Excel document. I am going to remove the gummy segment here because now we're talking about pre-rolls. And I'm going to leave my package size filter blank for now. And I'm going to come in and slice this by segment. What I'm trying to understand here is what segments are these brands dominating in? We know Jeter from being in the market. Y'all probably know Jeter's that #1 infused pre-roll brand. We see a very different story on this sales growth side over here. And I want to see are they offering other types of pre-rolls, and really what's driving their sales growth, right? So Lowell is probably going to look very different from Jeter. When we get to the sales growth, one of the things that is happening top line in the California market is there is quite a bit of a slowdown. So we see a lot more folks hovering over this 0% line. Jeter is still seeing growth, although it's not quite as dramatic as it has been over the last 20 months. The brand that catches my eye is this really tiny dot. I found Malibu RDL LLC. This is Malibu Cannabis. They make boogie board infused pre-rolls. I found them at this time last year. They just kind of popped up out of nowhere, and they've really grown exponentially ever since they entered into the market. So definitely a new brand success story where they came in at a time where the market was a little bit down and still managed to drive a fair amount of success for them. If we scroll down, this table on the brand overview is actually ranked by sales dollars. So we can see that they would be within the top 10 or so. I'm just counting visually, which isn't the best way to count. They offer 56 distinct products. Because we're honed into just pre-rolls here, this is going to show everybody's just within one category. If we were to select on multiple categories, we could see how many categories do these brands actually compete in. When we get down into brand sales over time, what we're looking at is their total sales dollars over time. Because Jeter is such a dominant brand within this space, they can actually skew this visualization and make it really hard to read. So I'm actually going to use Control- on my keyboard to zoom us back out a little bit because we were so zoomed in from the sales compare. So just do a couple of resets. And I'm going to go down into my legend, and I'm going to click Jeter off of this visualization. They're just such a dominant player that it's really hard to see who's doing what in this space. One group that's catching my eye, I see Raw Gardens actually coming into this space. It looks like in March of this year. So maybe looking to steal away some of that competitive market share from Jeter. Steezy has also entered into this space. It was a little bit before 6 months ago, but we can see them starting to grow here. They saw some notable success. It looks like through 420, we can kind of, if you can see the line with me here, this is Steezy as we get into May. If we wanted to hone in on any of these brands, and for the sake of this, I'm going to hone in on Malibu Cannabis just to see if they're still seeing that same success that I saw them have last year. We know they're growing really quickly. And it looks like their trend line looks fairly similar to Jeter, even though they're driving a lot less revenue. So Jeter's up there with 20 million or so revenue in the last 6 months, whereas Malibu with their boogie board pre-rolls are really just driving about 1 million. But they're still doing really well for themselves. If we wanted to build out a custom visualization here, we can start to click in individual brands. So we can see that Claiborne, who's entered into the infused pre-roll space fairly recently, they're still seeing some decline in their sales, some former dominance, right? Let's find, I'm just looking on our little map here, some former giants within this pre-roll space in California. Let's add on Island, Lime. Where is Lowell? And Lowell. So we can still see that Lowell is a dominant player in the market. In 2019, they were the #1 brand in the California pre-roll space. But some of these others are actually seeing a decline in market share that coincides with a growth for Malibu Cannabis. So if I was some of these smaller brands, right, if I was Lime, Island, or Claiborne, who've been in the market for quite some time, would keep an eye on this new brand. I mentioned that I was going to slice the data by segment. And for the most part, that hasn't done anything to our analysis until we get a little bit further down. Now we can start to answer questions like, where are these brands seeing most of their sales driven? What segments are they competing in? So our teal bars here are connoisseur and infused segments. We can see that that's driving quite a few people's sales really heavily. There are some folks like Crew who are still seeing the bulk of their sales volume driven from their hybrid single strain pre-rolls. Dime Bag as well is not yet playing in the infused space. I'm curious to see if they'll end up getting in there. And then when we look at our house brand, right, this is, if I was to go in, our house brand is probably going to be the cheapest product in the store. Retailers can get themselves a little bit better margin when they're offering their own products. You can see that the bulk of their sales are actually 52% of their sales are being driven by those hybrid single strain pre-rolls. What we're looking at when we compare these side by side is, does the product mix, so distinct number of SKUs offered by that brand, is that in line with what is actually driving some of their sales? So as you start to get into the market, one of the things that you can do is look at, hey, as we're on this list of folks, are we offering a product mix that is actually relevant to consumer sales? I'm trying to see if there's anyone who's super off kilter here. Really what I'm looking for is a big bar on the right-hand side that doesn't match a big bar on the left-hand side. It looks like everything is mostly in line for folks. I think if I was selfies, given that 69% of my sales is being driven by my hybrid single strains, it's very likely that some of these connoisseur and infused products are fairly new for them. I'd have to go look in at a different dashboard to really assess that. But I might want to put some more options out in my hybrid single strain. So they only offer 6 SKUs in hybrid single strain. But those 6 SKUs are actually driving 69% of their revenue, whereas these 11 SKUs that they're offering in the connoisseur and infused segment are really only driving about 31% of the revenue. Good place to be like, is that a good choice for me? Not going to go into too much more detail on the bottom of this dashboard. I will call out that if you do like to pull things out into Excel and pivot away till your heart's content, this segment details table is one of the most robust tables that we offer in Insight. So Sophie and Lauren, for you, we actually could have also pulled this table for average unit cost. So if you were going to do a couple of other analyses with an export, I might go and pull this one, because then we can pivot a whole bunch of tables together in different ways. But as you can see here, that average unit cost, this is where I said, you know, there are a lot of tables we can do this with. Let's just make sure we're picking the right one. This is another one, but we would see a lot more duplicates for each of those brands. As you can see here, I have a column for every month, and then I'd have a duplicate for every package size within every segment for that brand. I want to jump us deeper into this brand compare section. So we've been seeing how we can start to compare brands to each other. This is a very, very powerful dashboard that we can start to dive into. We can even get a little bit more narrow in our filtered selection. So we could come in here and add on a competitive analysis, just looking at these brands from connoisseur and infused. If we did that, I would recommend slicing this by package size so that we could see their different package size sales. Otherwise, if you slice by segment and you've honed into one segment, all of these bars will say 100% because we're just looking at the one segment. So that's one thing to call out, is as you're playing around with these different filters, the filters you set prior to this slice by filter will impact how you're slicing the data. My brand of choice that I want to dig into is this Malibu, because it's so new and so fresh and it's seeing so much growth. But Sophia and Lauren, do you have a brand that's kind of caught your eye or would be more in line with some of the work you're doing for Los?
Jeter's is definitely a top one for us. So this is great that we're already seeing them.
Perfect. Yeah, we can, I'll hone, I can talk forever about Jeter. Let's do a quick look at Jeter's SKUs before we move forward then. Not surprising, Jeter's 98% of Jeter sales is being driven by their connoisseur and infused products. They do offer a small selection of like sativa single strain. They do have 20 SKUs that are hybrid. So this is the number 2 segment here. But you know, 153 products that they're offering are really driving this 98% growth. We're all probably a little familiar with them. That's mostly their baby Jeter 2.5 gram packs. So instead of honing into Malibu, what I'm going to do is take us into our brand details page. I already have this open. We can access this a couple of different ways. So if we know that Jeter is a brand of interest, you can see these are little hyperlinks as I scroll over these. If you right click onto Jeter, we can actually just open that brand details page for Jeter. The one I pulled up isn't as relevant. It's looking in Michigan edibles, so we'll stay here. And this page is going to allow me to deep dive into a single brand. So what we've been doing is comparing brands to each other. And now what we're going to do is hone in on one brand or one major competitor that we're really looking to understand more. This is also a great tab as you start to get into market to monitor your own brand performance. So again, this is brand compare, brand details page. Think of this as like an investor tear sheet. The third way that you can get into this page is you can just type Jeter into the search bar. And all of these small package sizes, as this loads here, all these small little boxes mean that these are SKUs. So what I recommend doing is continuing to type after that. And so you can see Jeter in. And then we don't want Jeter in Michigan, we want Jeter in California. And this would also pull us into that brand details page as well. If you know that this is directly where you want to go, I recommend just using the search bar. I'm going to use our little hamburger menu to collapse our sidebar menu. And we might want to pull Jeter's story out a little bit longer because really the last 20 months for Jeter have been a pretty impressive growth story, to say the least. A couple of quick call outs. So when we're looking at this top brand percent market share, this is total market share regardless of your subscription. So even if you have a partial subscription, let's say Jeter's playing around in concentrates, edibles, vapor pens, and things outside of the pre-roll space, those sales will also be factored into this. And this will be their total true percent market share, not limited to your filtered selection. So that's one major call out on that is this brand market share might look a little bit different than some of the others that you see because this is going to give you that truest number. In the last 20 complete months, Jeter has sold an impressive almost 8 million total units in sales. And the reason I pulled their story back was because back in the day, and even a little bit before November of 2020, it's really say starting in June of 2020, historically, we'd seen Jeter and Sublime really compete neck and neck. But around June of 2021, we start to see some really astronomical growth from Jeter. So I don't know what they did on the back end, if they were able to get some really sweet distribution out there and really push out a more impressive amount of unit volume in terms of production facilities that they're opening. I bet Lowe's would probably have some ideas. Lauren and Sophia, you might as well. But we really just see that continual growth of brand market share. And while in the last 20 complete months, they're 2.6% of the total California market, as we get into more current times, we can see that that has continued to exponentially increase. So when we look at, I'm having a hard time honing in on June, so we'll focus in on May. When we look at May of this year, they own 4% of the total California market. We can see that story here in that just continual unit volume increase, right? Most folks saw a really slow February. This is one of our shortest months. So this little bar in most recent times doesn't really catch my eye at all because this is typical for market trends. And they did do some pretty impressive discounting, it looks like. So this is average item price that we're honing in on this dark line bar here. We tend to see that dip for a lot of brands in April, mostly associated with 420 discounting. As a reminder, when we're looking at average item price, we're looking at that after discount pre-consumer paid tax price. Jeter is continuing to grow. And so one of the things that I think is most interesting about Jeter is if we go back to this market overview page, we see these three visualizations at a market level, and we can see that the total market of California month over month and year over year is growing closer to 89 to 90%. But when we toggle back over into Jeter, we can see that Jeter is continuing to grow 200+% month over month and year over year. So they really are outpacing the total market of California. When we start to get into some of their more intimate details, their top products. We can see here that their top products are all dominated by those 2.5 gram Baby Jeter 5-packs. So they're seeing the most success with their strawberry shortcake infused. This is their #1 product here, as well as their blue Zittles, doing really well for them. One thing that I'd call out here as a side comment is that most of these top SKUs are fruit flavors. So I'm seeing strawberry, blueberry Zittles, blueberry Kush, peach rings, watermelon Zittles, grape ape, honeydew. And then when we start to round out some of the back half of their top 10, like their bottom 3 of the top 10, then we start to get into more classic strains. So one thing that you might want to look at here is doing a follow-up strain analysis, which we'll jump into in my metadata training. We can come into this metadata section and see, like, is that holding true for everybody, or is that a Jeter specific trend? As I mentioned, Jeter does play around in some other categories. They don't see nearly as much success. So I like to look at this brand rank by category. There are a couple of places that you can find brand ranking, but if someone's ranking at, in the 700s, you're certainly not going to see that in the top 30 brands, right? Jeter wouldn't even show up on the category details page for flower, but they are ranking in flower closer to 750. Not driving a ton of sales dollars. We can see here that we barely even see flower on the screen here for them. And I believe that's because they brought in flower and then phased it out fairly quickly. We'll start to inkle towards some pricing. I do have a follow-up training. Our next one of these hangouts is actually going to be a quick 7-10 analysis. Lauren and Sophia, great opportunity to come in and meet some retailers as well. It's open to everybody who uses Headset's tools, and I'll go across all 3 of them so you can kind of get a feel for what do our retailers get to do within the system. And then we'll jump into demand planning. And I believe the training after that will be our pricing analysis. So we'll start to get into more deep pricing information. What I like to call out for folks is when we're looking at this, we can see their average margin, and I'm really going to hone in on their pre-rolls. And one thing to call out is that in California, a lot of brands are driving 50 to 55% margin for their retailers. What we're seeing with Jeter is that they're actually driving closer to 47%. I'd probably want to hone in my date range, maybe look at the last 90 days to see how this is in more recent months to be able to do a pricing analysis. But in the last 20, they're driving about 47% margin for most folks. And then the next piece that I like to call out is we do offer a quick pricing comparison here. There's quite a bit of text in this little hover, this little I dot here, and I'll summarize it for you. When we're looking at the selected brand's average item price, so when I'm looking at Jeter here, you can see that their average item price is $28.54. When I'm looking at total market average, what I'm actually looking at is the total market without Jeter. So if you were to toggle into different brands, like let's say we wanted to go back to Malibu Cannabis, RDL LLC, we'd see a different number for this total market because their average item price impacts the market in a different way. So Jeter is really as a whole driving up the pre-rolls cost. And part of that is that they're offering an infused multi-pack. And, when we take Jeter out, those 2.5 grams, if we took all of Jeter's products out of the market, it's a pretty big percent of the market, right? It's 21% of total sales share. So the price without Jeter for the market is actually much, much lower. In our next training, like I said, we'll deep dive in. I think it's 2 trainings from now that we'll start to get into some of this pricing analysis, and I'll walk you through how to do a deeper dive competitive analysis using this pricing details page and understanding good, better, best pricing via the pricing bands. There is a pricing dashboard within this brand comparison page. I did not pull this up for the sake of this training because we are considering sunsetting this dashboard. It's one of our older pricing options, but it is there for you if you want to take a peek. The filters function the same way as the sales compare, and you can start to get into a competitive analysis there. The last things that you'll have on this investor tear sheet for your Jeter analysis will be their top 50 products. So again, another space where you could do a quick visual analysis of how many of their strains are really focused around fruit flavors. That's just, we even see horchata in here. But the reason I call that out is it's very different from a lot of other brands. I think it's something that sets them apart is they really do focus on a lot of these fruitier flavors. We see like Agent Orange is down here, Strawberry Shortcake is down here. And for me, I'm not in market, so I don't get to know if I smoke a Jeter, am I going to get any of this great flavor in here? But I'm probably going to be more inclined to buy something like Strawberry Shortcake or Blue Zittles because or personally a lemony strain. So I know they have a limoncello on here as well. I'm personally more likely to buy some of those just because I'm not an avid cannabis connoisseur and they speak to me. Like I love peach rings. And so I might just buy their peach rings pack because I like peach rings in general. It's a very interesting marketing thing that they do. And it's very in line with their overall branding of being more fun and more playful in the market. Lauren, Sophia, Evan, does anybody have anything else that they'd want to deep dive into? That's really wrapped up everything that I wanted to touch on today. As I mentioned, we'll go into pricing in another section, and we'll go into how to do a competitive analysis from a metadata perspective in the future. But I'm happy to spend the last 10 minutes of this time deep diving into any specific questions for y'all.